Hey everybody, I'm Joe,
And I'm Dan.
and welcome to the Exposition Table.
You still haven't come up with a catchy tagline yet.
We're still technically new at this.
Well, it's a good thing that eventually, when we get far enough along with this, we can go ahead and just remake it, redo it again from the ground up. Uh,
Yes,
but
spend all of our resources to tackle the same subject, create the
we're
same
gonna
piece of work.
we're gonna from the ground up recreate this exact podcast using brand new 8K audio technology, surround sound features, just to make it sound as rough as this does. Any audio quirks, any hiccups, I'll
Yep.
make sure to time all of my exactly in rhythm.
Faithful for the
But you don't want to.
fans.
But you don't want to hear that. You've already gotten this experience. You don't want to have that again.
And that
But
leads to today's episode.
that's
Re
something the game industry hasn't learned.
Nah.
The games industry loves to remake things over and over again, even if it's not necessary, even if we don't need it.
Yep. There's a time and a place for everything. But when that time and place is, it varies from studio to studio, evidently. We are talking about remakes we don't want.
Yeah. What exactly is a remake, and what exactly is something we don't want?
Alright. As most base level, a remake is rebuilding the same experience with a different engine or technology.
Yeah, so a remake is effectively trying to take the original experience and bringing it to a new audience in as authentic a way as possible while improving as many elements as you can, which
Yeah.
varies from a reboot, which goes in a different direction, whether mechanically, visually,
It,
thematically. It tries to do something different and spin a
it,
new way.
it's a reinterpretation.
Yeah. And a remaster is simply taking what you already remember and either changing one or two features, but fundamentally keeping it effectively the same. Now, there is some gray area with that, and we'll talk about some examples as we
Yeah.
go along of how that line can be kind of blurred. But effectively, a remaster is just the exact same game with maybe a couple visual tweaks and a couple audio visual, maybe a few improvements, but a remake hits more in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. A a remaster is generally the same program being run on better hardware.
Yeah, we can get caught up in the technicals of it, but that's basically what it is. And
Yeah.
what we don't want is for them to take, as we alluded to in the intro, we don't want a company to just take a project that already exists and just spend years recreating it just to have it feel like almost the exact same thing as what we already have.
Yeah.
When we came up with the idea for this episode, we had one key example. And then the week that we decided we were going to record it, another example popped up. The
So,
first of which, if you want to handle that one.
all right. Well, obviously, like the big impetus of where this question has really started to come in the industry and just the culture at large is the Last of Us remake. Like they remade Part One, while it's a game that's readily remastered relatively recently ago, and is still readily available in modern hardware.
Yeah,
And
the
they,
last The
uh,
Last of Us came out in like 2013
yeah,
or somewhere like that. And then the remaster came out in like 2014. But you can like play that on your PS5 and basically PS5 quality.
yeah. And then this year they up and went and remade it, and yeah, it does look better and generally, but then it let a lot of people think, what was the point of this?
What was the point of taking a game that was already good and already playable in a better performance than was available on PS4 by backwards compatibility. What was the point of remaking it again?
Yeah.
You can already get a good experience out of your current console, and instead of putting that into any other game, you know, there were rumors about an Uncharted remake. I think that dev time would have gone better into that. And sure, I necessarily wouldn't have needed an Uncharted 1 remake, but that game's like 15 years old or something.
Yeah.
That game could have used. Jeez.
She's just hitting you.
Yeah, I only played that game a couple years ago. Ironically, the PS4 remaster. But yeah, Uncharted. Yeah, that would have made a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
But The Last of Us didn't need a remake. 2 only came out a couple years ago, and I understand why you use the engine, but
Yeah.
that is
It just kind of feels self-congratulatory in a weird sense.
yeah, they're stroking their ego, how awesome their franchise is.
Yeah.
It is the second most ridiculous remake of a game on a console that you can already play that game on from a Sony first or second party developer.
So that leads to, is it a rumor or just straight up fact?
I think it's been confirmed, but let's just pretend that it is, because I think it has been confirmed. I should have looked this up before we started recording, but we're just gonna go with it now. So the let's just call it heavily rumored, but probably true. Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn is what, 5 years old?
Yeah. 5 years old.
That is so. That feels so like new, and it is new. Horizon 2 just came out a couple months ago, and we're already ready for Horizon 1 to get remade. Why? What is the point of investing those resources? Yeah, 2017. The game's not even 5 years old yet.
Well, it is
Why?
5.
What month did it come?
It didn't come out in like April.
Ah, damn! It came out in February. I'm wrong.
Oh, yeah. But still, like, it's a native PS4 game. It's one gen old.
Yeah, it was a PS4 Pro enhanced game, so it already has performance improvements from the Pro and the PS5.
So it's a half generation old.
Yeah. What's even the point? What's even the point of wasting that much money? So
Ah,
this really's got us, thinking, what are some other games that a company could want to remake that we're worried that they're going to do and that we would severely
yeah.
hope they didn't. Don't.
Yeah. Like, we've been talking about Sony's headliners right now. Like, those aren't games we're personally invested in. But now we're going to talk about a few games we are fans of that we don't quite want to see a remake for.
Are there games that we, you know, think could happen? Games that, you know, some of these might seem like crazy speculation, and they probably are. But there's a good reason to believe that the company could dig these out of the vault and decide that they want to bring them back.
Yeah.
And we're just ready. We're just getting ourselves mentally prepared for that reality.
Yep.
So I guess hmm,
Hmm.
I know we talked about a couple of them that we kind of didn't want to go to. Um, all right, let's go with one that I already know of that I was thinking of. So I do not want to see a remake, at least not in the current format, for Pokemon Black and White.
Yeah. Diamond and Pearl was a game that was, well, were games that were heavily requested for a remake. We got that remake, and it did not exactly take the critical landscape by storm.
There's a fair argument to be made that it is an inferior product to Nintendo DS games that it's supposed to be remaking.
And so, staunch fans of Generation 5 are starting to think, like, they don't want this treatment. Like, as far as we know, unless you're Kanto, like, you don't get a second shot at a remake in
Yeah,
Pokemon.
Pokemon Black and White are at this point my favorite Pokemon games, and some of that bias does come into this. But I think that Diamond and Pearl were probably Pokemon at some of its most cutesy. So I think while I don't like the art style that they went with, I feel like Diamond and Pearl is probably the last game you could get away with that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, once you start remaking 3D games, then it's like you're downgrading the models into a completely different format. But here you're taking sprites and kind of throwing them up into like a cutesy chibi style.
Yeah. A very literal translation of how the games looked.
And like I don't like the art style of BDSP, but I can understand taking the art style of Diamond and Pearl and converting that over to it.
Yeah.
However, I feel like Black and White would be a severe disservice because of the more air quote gritty, you know, sort of older art style, the more sort of detailed sort of
Yeah.
art style. Uh, it would be a severe disservice to that game's narrative and that game's sort of storyline. I mean, it already is a disservice to Pearls, but
Yeah.
I think that I'm basically saying that Black and White is better. And I really like if I feel burnt up about a game I'm already pretty indifferent about getting remade. Imagine how I'd feel about something I consider a good game getting remade.
Yeah. Like Black and White and Black and White 2 both kind of tried to push the boundaries of what the DS could do.
Yeah.
So getting a very conservative style remake wouldn't fall over well. And like I'm not a big fan of the story of Black and White. I don't think it was executed that well, but even I would feel kind of cheated from a game of that style.
It would be a severe disservice um, to the storyline of that game if
Yeah.
they were to do that. Moving on from that, we had a couple other ones that we were thinking of.
Okay. I'll take the wheel here and say one of the remakes that has been commonly discussed, but has generally been one of the biggest examples of games people generally don't want to see remade is Super Metroid.
Yeah, Super Metroid and a lot of those classic games from that era. Yeah, Super Metroid and probably A Link to the Past, I think, would be two
Yeah.
kind of prime examples of that.
Yeah.
It's proven that, you can remake those games, using what we saw on, you know, Samus Returns and Zelda.
Link's Awakening.
Well, yeah, Link's Awakening and also A Link Between Worlds that there is, evidence that you could make it good, but it's just those
What's
games are classic.
kind of the point? Like,
What's the hook? Besides just make money off of the game you already know is good. Like, what's the hook? What's the angle?
yeah, it's like the games wouldn't improve that much from a remake.
Yeah, and it's just like, again, that resources could be used for something. Those resources could be used for
Just make
something
a new
good.
game.
Link's Awakening, I feel was. I'm not a big fan of the art style, um, but I think even barring that, I feel like, you know, they spent all that time on that remake, and now it's just no one talks about that game anymore. It was effectively a flash in the pan. They made it, they got some money, and they moved on with their time. That didn't advance anything. We're not going to see another top-down Zelda because of the sales of Link's Awakening. It was effectively a stopgap. Same with Super Metroid, or I'm sorry, same with. Well, Samus Returns did
I'd say
actually do.
Samus Returns is
Yeah,
on a higher level than that. A lot of the
yeah,
mechanics that were introduced in that game did carry over to Dread.
yeah. I guess what I'm saying is not that that one didn't do anything. More so, I don't think a Super Metroid remake would do anything. It wouldn't provide
Yeah.
anything
No.
besides being just a celebratory romp for the franchise, which I guess considering this is like Super Samus Returns and Metroid Dread have been the first few really good games in a long while. It would be just kind of pointless to see Super Metroid. I mean, if they did Zero Mission or Fusion, honestly, Fusion I think would probably be the best approach if they're going to
Yeah.
remake any of them is to do Fusion. Um, Especially because you can't officially play that on any current running Nintendo consoles via their virtual consoles no longer existing. But
That's not a problem that's not a problem that requires a remake as a solution. That's just a problem caused by pig-headedness.
Yeah, but a $60 solution to that problem certainly sounds better than a annual subscription, I think.
Yeah.
I think just the idea of not wanting Nintendo to waste resources on games that we already know are good, we already know are legendary, that do not need to see another romp around just to, because they're going to charge $60 for them anyway. They charge $60 for a Game Boy remake, and it looks like a Game Boy game. So
Yeah.
what are they going to charge for those games? $60 for Super Metroid, and I don't know. Even if they add a bunch of mechanics, it's like, why don't you just make a new one? Especially in the case of Metroid, where they've already proven they can make a new one. It
Yeah.
would be super redundant.
Yeah. Um.
It would be super redundant.
Yeah. Super redundant Metroid.
I was realizing I was saying super. um, it's so much easier to think of things when you're not
Not
recording.
recording. All right, then I'll kind of run with like the big game I don't want to see remade.
Yeah, that'll give me some time to
All right.
think because I know I have a few, but I want to kind of hit up
All right.
some of the
Yeah.
bigger topic ones.
All right. So in the Kingdom Hearts community, a question you'll see every now and then in recent times is whether or not the first game should be remade, and I'm very against it for a few reasons, and that's really chiefly that I don't think Kingdom Hearts 1 really stands to benefit much from a remake, and there might even be some problems with a remake.
Yeah,
Um,
let's not bury the lead here. Kingdom Hearts 1 is a goddamn masterpiece of a game.
yeah,
This coming from you, someone who's been a long-time Kingdom Hearts fan, and me, somebody who played Kingdom Hearts in my teens, didn't play it again for a while. Actually thought Kingdom Hearts 1 was kind of mid when I was a kid because I played Kingdom Hearts 2 first.
took a lot of
And someone
convincing.
who and then last year I played Kingdom Hearts 1 4 times. Almost got the platinum trophy, and then long story short. But yeah, I basically was on the path to platinuming the game if I just had a few more hours with it. Because I was just so in love with the game so much.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
and like I
just
did all that. I did all that, and I still haven't even finished Chain of Memories. So it's like not just, oh, I'm a diehard for the franchise. It's like, no, Kingdom Hearts 1 got its hooks into me.
yeah, and like this isn't this. This mostly isn't nostalgia. Like this is a game he just got into recently. It's nostalgia for me, perhaps, but man, I could back it up. Like, that's such a tightly made game that I don't, not even sure what kind of upgrades you'd get. Like, yeah, you'd have stronger visuals. Um,
Arguably.
yeah, arguably, like Kingdom Hearts 1 is probably one of the better aged games of its time in
Yeah, I
visuals.
mean, like you could get the same effect of just remastering, taking the old graphics and just bumping the resolution and maybe fixing the mouth on some of the cutscenes. That's like the only real graphical improvements you need
Yeah,
because that original game has such a sharp, strong art style. Like
yeah,
the art style is so strong. That's why they used that engine for like a decade until Kingdom Hearts 3. Every
yeah,
game, same art style.
and not like the game controls perfectly fine.
Yeah, controls amazing.
Yeah,
So
I don't know. I feel like you'd kind of lose the balance of Kingdom Hearts 1 if you tried to modernize it in the sense that up to the sensibilities of modern Kingdom Hearts. I just don't think you really gain much. You probably lose more than you gain, especially with some of the world's characters and stuff that would need to be revoiced or perhaps even replaced.
yeah, you have to deal with a lot of legal issues. The question comes up of, are they allowed to bring Tarzan back? If not, are they gonna get rid of Tarzan? You'd have to re-record all the original actors or get brand new actors. Some of those Disney actors are dead now. You know,
Yeah,
Uh,
like it brings every time this question gets brought up. Like I don't come up with many, if any, positives and a bunch of negatives to doing it.
Yeah, even if like the gameplay was like okay, you've made in the past you've talked to me about how Kingdom Hearts 3, you're not a big fan of it mechanically. Even if you were, the fact is the game would play differently and that would dramatically change how you interact with it. It's not as simple as just,
Yeah,
having air quote smoother physics or something. It's
yeah.
like
Kingdom Hearts
with
operates under a different kind of
yeah,
formula now.
it's like when they remade, you know, the Resident Evil games, like they play completely differently. That is basically a different game entirely. And of course, there's many other remakes that completely play differently. But I'm just thinking in terms of like they're both third-person shooters, but they operate with entirely different mechanics, entirely different physics, entirely different motions.
Yeah,
They're different beasts entirely. So Kingdom Hearts 1's very specific ebb and flow would just be off-put.
yeah,
It's a it's like a perfect length game. It's a perfect physics game. It's one of those games where like if you added too much, it might start to feel a little padded out. It's just perfect romp through kind of game. Um,
yeah,
and it stands to lose more than it gains from it.
yeah,
And also the effect of them trying to retcon in a bunch of later release stuff into the narrative through post sequence cutscenes would probably be really obnoxious. Start talking about things from later games, and it's like, dude, get this out of here.
yeah.
Nomura wouldn't be able to help himself. He'd find a way to make it canon. He'd probably make the remake a timeline branch and make it
Oh,
canon somehow.
oh yeah. It might get Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, something like that. Or like Pokemon Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby, where they're not just remakes, they're alternate timelines or alternate dimensions
Yeah, and that's the
that
last
apply
thing
the
Kingdom
original
Hearts
canon.
needs right now.
Yeah.
Uh, of alternate versions of things that have already happened. Talking about reboots. Yeah, and once you start tampering with that, you start getting to weird territories. Like when is it a remake? When is it a reboot? And like,
I was thinking real quick because now that we're talking about Square, um, do you think that they would remake any other Final Fantasy game in the style of Final Fantasy VII?
I'm starting to
And would you
think
want that?
not. And in terms of how I want it in the style 7, no.
There's no Final Fantasy you'd want to see like that. 6, 10,
Uh,
13.
like remade from the ground up. Like yeah, like I think some games would benefit. Well, obviously 13, but that's because its foundation is just worse. But like the way that they remake Final Fantasy games, like obviously not counting the pixel remasters, which are a smaller ordeal. Like we're talking about full blown AAA remake. Do I really want like okay, Final Fantasy X is like in my top 10 at least. Would I want to see that with a completely different combat system, potentially chopped up into smaller pieces? I I don't know. Yeah, I'd love to see it with modern fidelity, but I don't know. I don't think it's. I'm not sure if it'd actually be worth it. You know?
It's one of those things where it probably would be cool to experience, but you'd also be like, this isn't like it's more than a remake. That one's really closer to a reboot, and I think remake is used sort of
Yeah.
as a misleading title on purpose
Yeah.
for that game to kind of trick you. Uh, a classic Square Enix tomfoolery.
Yeah. Like I could say it'd be neat. The original would still exist. You could just remake it and have a different view of it. But if I'm saying it's neat, it's probably not worth making because this would take a huge amount of time and effort away from other possible games that could exist just to remake a game that is still good.
Pivot away for a second from Square. Um, while we've been talking, I did think of another one. Um, I'll talk about the franchise, but then I want to specifically talk about one title. So I would be okay if we got remakes of Metal Gear up until Solid. If they wanted to remake Metal Gear 1 and 2 and then remake Metal Gear Solid or just remake Metal Gear Solid, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I probably wouldn't be the biggest fan of it, but I think the
Yeah.
first game you could remake just fine. It'd be nice to maybe have that game when they constantly use it in flashbacks and not have it be PS1 graphics because they don't have the licensing rights to use Twin Snakes because of a strange contract with Nintendo that made that a GameCube exclusive, despite it running on the Metal Gear Solid 2 engine. Despite that weirdness, I would be okay with Metal Gear Solid. But 2 and 3, please don't, especially not modern Konami.
Yeah, that
Especially not modern Konami. Would
Metal
make
Gear Solid
any of them. What?
is a very well, Metal Gear in general is just it has its own issues. Like that series has changed hands. Its main head is not there. Like
Yeah, not even getting into the whole like Kojima thing, which obviously would be an issue in and of itself. Even if they were like same script, like they didn't change the script at all. Um, I just feel like those games are such specific time capsules of themselves. I haven't played through 3, but I have seen a lot of the cutscenes, so I have a general gist of it. Okay, I did play the 3DS demo like a billion times because Metal Gear Solid 3 came out on the 3DS for some reason. So, you know what? Metal Gear Solid 3 got a remake, so I can already say it. I can take that off the conversation entirely because I just want to talk about 2. And I
yeah,
don't have to talk about 3 because it did get remade on the 3DS, and it was pretty decent because it also looked like a PS2 game, so it didn't feel that
yeah,
different anyway.
yeah. It wasn't that big of a jump.
Yeah. So, I'm going to specifically talk about Metal Gear Solid 2. Um, that game's got a beautiful narrative that could only have been written in the very specific time window it came out.
That game,
Because it is more relevant now, 21 years later, than it was when it came out in 2001,
yeah,
about AI learning and changing itself and information being manipulated by big corporations and the government and, you know, using our politicians as figureheads just to push a political ideal. There's so much in that game
yeah,
that is relevant now that no one would have the gall. It was a fictional fantasy 20 years ago. You can't do that game now straight because now it just seems like you're just talking about current political deals instead of talking about like a nebulous future.
yeah.
It is so real that you can't make it a fantasy anymore. So on top of again all the other stuff, the gameplay mechanics differences, the fact that Kojima's not there, the fact that I don't trust the Metal Gear Survive team to do it, the fact that they probably would just rather make a pachinko machine, um, all that stuff. But I think I would be terrified over the concept of Metal Gear Solid 2 getting a remake, just because it'd be like remaking like anything that also happens to have some of that 9/11 time period. Like it'd be like if you told me they were remaking Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, it'd be like, no, that movie exists in a very specific time window. It can't be done again, or else it's gonna feel different.
Yeah.
So
All right. Since we've just talked about two of the most prolific games of 2001, um, and you specifically brought up like government in modern period America of 2001, I think it's time for us to transition to a certain, I'd say, duology of games. The,
yeah, sure, I know where you're going with
yeah.
this. Based on what I said, I hate the face they gave to Spider-Man in the Spider-Man PS5 remaster. That was another fucking pointless one. They
Yeah.
better not remake Miles Morales. It's already on PS5. But no, talk about the thing you're actually going to talk about. I just wanted to bring it up because I was mentioning
Yeah.
Spider-Man and I remembered that was the first of the Sony remake trend.
Oh my
Uh,
god. Yeah, I forgot about that.
well, it's closer to a remaster, but I
Yeah.
fucking the new Spider-Man head. Anyway, government. Talk about what you want to talk
Okay.
about.
So, Sonic Adventure 1 and, I mean, the government thing was all about 2, but You
Yeah.
know, these games get lumped together for pretty obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like Sonic Adventure 1 in particular is a pretty hot button topic on games that probably should be remade. And I don't think these are games that you can't remake well. I totally
Yeah.
think it can be. I just don't think Sonic Team can remake them.
Certainly not current Sonic Team.
Yeah, like obviously Frontiers is not out at time of recording. Maybe that game might change my mind a bit. But with the way that Sonic games are written, their struggle to make well controlling 3D games, they're
I feel it would have to be, I think, a conceptual ground up remake closer to the Resident Evils and Final Fantasy, because I can't see them just doing a straight remake of the original games and not wanting to change the narrative and change the gameplay and change the whole core philosophy of the game.
yeah, it like it is hard to imagine what a remake of these games would look like in 2020X.
Like, it would have to be closer to Frontiers. It'd have to be like an open world adventure game. And, you actually physically walk across the different planes, much like you did in Sonic Adventure, what, stretched out to an open world environment.
Yeah, like you'd probably be more Jack and Daxter than Sonic Adventure.
I mean, hey, who knows? Maybe Sonic Frontiers is the testing ground. They got multiple biomes. They got a grass biome, a desert biome. Maybe they're testing out for a big open world Sonic Adventure remake.
I mean, you
They
know,
got big fishing.
yeah, true. This isn't a game like once again, these aren't games I don't want to see remade, but more like games I'm very cautious about a remake of.
Yeah.
Because as I've kind of mentioned with the Pokemon thing, you only get to do this. Well, I mean, technically, you don't get to only get to do it once, but the term Sonic Adventure remake will be burnt on your first attempt.
There are not many games that get to get remade twice. Pokemon coincidentally gets to remake themselves a few times. Maybe if you're Mario, you get to remake yourself once or twice, depending on if you do one on a handheld.
Yeah,
Uh, no, Sonic Adventure. No, we're also past the age where you can also remake on a handheld and then remake on a console. That's sometimes where you get two of those remakes, but we're long
yeah,
past that age. Um, no, it's like you remake it and it's over. You're done.
yeah. Like that. That's kind of yeah. You get one shot usually.
Well, let's hope they don't fuck it.
Yeah.
I will.
Unfortunately, it, a remake is almost about as much as trust as it is about just pure competency.
I don't trust modern Sonic team. I mean, I think Frontiers would be good, but I just don't think there's too many narrative things that they would have to either change or compromise their current vision of, the whole Sonic, like, was it basically the Bible or something of what they aren't
Yeah.
allowed to do based on Sega's demands.
Yeah, it's not even just a mechanical thing. On a writing level as well, like it's just hard to see them really do these games justice.
Sonic Adventure 1, I think you could do, but Sonic Adventure 2, I don't think you could do. And it's because of one damn reason. One damn reason. They would not be able to write Shadow the way that they want, unless they make an exception for a retelling of an already existing
Yeah.
story. But I think they would lean too much into his angry personality, even in this remake, and it would kind of muddle the original intent of the character.
Yeah. Like it
I don't
requires
know how
an
to.
understanding of nuance and just I'm not sure they can do.
Yeah, I don't think they would be able to handle retelling that story. I think Sonic Adventure, sure, I wouldn't particularly love Roger Craig's version of Sonic in these environments, but you know, I with a couple rewrites, a couple cheesy jokes thrown in, fine. It's the same story.
Yeah.
The ship is losing altitude.
Like I do think that Adventure 1 could stand to gain a bit more, especially considering that it's more open than Adventure 2.
Yeah, I feel like if we're gonna get anything, it's Adventure 1. I think Adventure 2. And not just because it's my favorite video game and possibly my favorite piece of media ever created that I'm blind to it. It's more so I just don't think they would do it well.
Yeah,
And even if they did do it well, I personally wouldn't need it remade, but I'd be more excited about it. I'm just convinced
that they can't right now.
Sonic Adventure 1, I think, is closer to their current vision of what they can do and what the company is willing to do. Sonic Adventure 2 is basically the antithesis to what modern Sonic wants to be.
Yeah. All right. Um.
Oh, I think of a few more other ones. Let's also go through a couple examples of things that don't need remakes that are coming out. Have you already forgotten about Kirby's Return to Dreamland?
Oh man. Yeah. Like honestly, why? Why remake that game?
Why not just port it? Why do you need to do like a whole kind of remake? I don't know if it's from the grounds up, but it's definitely more than just a simple paint job. I think it's using like the Star Allies physics or something.
Yeah. Like you could have just
Why did I go?
re-released it. Like obviously you're trying to get the notoriety you get from remaking it. Because Return, I don't know. I'm not even that big on Return to Dreamland, but like
I
it
think it
doesn't.
kind of.
I don't think it's really improving much from this remake.
Really just one of those why even bothering kind of deals. Just put the Wii ROM on a freaking cartridge.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still a lot of games from that era that I would be, somewhat hesitant to sort of see. Um, there's a lot of. I would worry if they do too many of those AAA style remakes like Last of Us. Um, a big comparison that I was thinking of when we were originally pitching this episode idea was it was making me think about the time because movies also have to deal with the same issue as well about
Yeah.
movies getting remade, and now it's been a big thing over the last like 10, 15 years or so. Actually, to be honest, movies have kind of been getting remade for a while. Honestly, I could get to that to a whole different discussion, how like since basically the 90s we've been having nothing but movie remakes for like 30 years ago. Like 90s they kept remaking 60s movies, the
Yeah.
2000s they kept remaking 70s and 80s movies. Now we're on like the 80s getting remade. 80s and 90s getting remade. Um and just a lot of them it's just to get money, just to get notoriety. You're not really going to do anything with the IP and basically you bring it up just to get some quick cash and just kill it afterwards. It's like what's even the point of doing it? Um
Yeah.
But I was thinking about how The Last of Us 1 reminds me a lot of a time they remade Psycho, and they did a shot-for-shot remake of it with Vince Vaughn, most famously known for, what was it, The Wedding Crashers and Dodgeball? That dude. They
Yeah.
remade The Shining with him. No, not The Shining, Psycho.
Yeah.
They remade it and literally recreated every single shot, and no one likes that movie. It's the same movie, but you can't recapture some of that again. And yeah, video games are a little bit different, but there's just something to it. You can't just like
I
there's
think
an art to it.
I
There's an
th-
art to making a medium like this that you can't just take the previous experience and just redo it again. You have to have a little more tact than that.
yeah, I think film remakes are even more slippery because unlike games, there's not really like a compatibility issue with film.
Yeah, it's like you can play the movie on the same device.
Yeah, it's
Video
like
game.
nothing's really stopping an old movie from being made most of the time, like being, you know, put on something.
Yeah, it's like video games as much as, certain remakes are okay, that doesn't excuse the Sony remakes though,
No,
because they
no.
literally can play on the same device. But in theory, video game remakes have a little bit more leeway than a movie.
And
where it's like,
partially that is because companies are kind of stubborn to make their old content accessible. But there can be reasons, and also video games 30 years ago are fundamentally different than games now. But movies from 30 years ago are, while quite different, like
they're still
experienced in a
movies.
very similar way.
You still sit on a couch and like veg out for 2 hours. Just now you might have a phone instead of before where you'd have to like just twiddle your thumbs if you were bored
Yeah, like you still
or
see,
read a crossword.
yeah, like people's faces are still people's faces. You know,
Yeah. Video games are a weird medium in that regard because there is also the mechanical difference between them. It's like, you can remaking a game can have its benefits, but it's like these remakes that don't actually change that much about how it plays, that it's kind of pointless to do.
yeah. All right, then that kind of brings up something that I've heard talked about a few times. The realm of anime remakes, because there's generally two states of mind about this.
Oh,
Um,
so we're just going in and talking about remaking television shows now, which is fine. I just want to know where we're going.
yeah. Now I was just gonna take a tiny dip into a,
That's
sh-
fine.
a show I've been seeing, because in the anime world, like a lot of the bigger name animes you'll hear about are adaptations of written material, often while
Yeah,
the written material is being made, which
yeah,
leads to a bunch of like production problems due to having to be made week by week for for several years, if not dozens,
yeah,
and having to deal with pacing issues, like trying to make filler because one episode adapts more than one chapter a week.
yeah.
So, in this regard, I see some people talk about like a Naruto remake because Naruto's been over for several years now, and like why not remake it for a modern audience to get into? I mean, the reason why it really shouldn't be is that most of the canon material looks pretty good still. The show still has new viewers. And like, yeah, it is unfortunate that a lot of the consequences of the weekly release schedule do kind of just have to be rolled over by even new viewers. But that's more of a case for just get like a supercut or a filler guide, not waste a
So I think
massive amount of resources into remaking a show.
so. I think what you're suggesting is that rather than them make a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, they should do a Dragon Ball Kai instead of completely reproducing the show. Like, oh, we screwed up, let's do it again. Because
Yeah.
from what I've heard, the original Full Metal Alchemist anime, while it has its fans, was not very good. And I've only seen a couple episodes of Brotherhood, but that was pretty damn good. And I've heard Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is fantastic.
Um.
Um,
Yeah. Like.
which is a like full on like redo
Yeah.
after the
Like.
manga had been concluded because the original Full Metal Alchemist anime had a new ending. It was
Yeah.
not
That's
concurrent
it.
with the
Like. That's the case in where a remake is a bit more justified. Is when the original production just doesn't try to stick with the manga's publication and has its own interpretation and ending as a result.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm perfectly fine with like Hunter x Hunter getting a 2011 adaptation. It's like, yeah, that makes sense because there's a lot of material that just wasn't made into anime form due to it not existing yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's ostensibly it. It's
But
more
what
of
you're saying is with Naruto, you'd rather than do Dragon Ball Kai, which is if they're gonna do anything, you
yeah,
prefer Kai,
yeah,
or they
it,
just cut
it,
out filler and restructure, clean
yeah,
it up, maybe add a few new animations.
yeah. Like while I do think a remake could be really good, it just be such a huge waste of resources in the end of the day because you're readapting parts that are still good. It just needs to be organized, not really redone. And like
Yeah.
I'm perfectly fine with their not being a Naruto Kai. But if you're going to want to readapt Naruto, I'd rather have it just be a yeah, like a remaster or just a cleaned up version rather than yeah, full on remake. I'm not really against anime remakes. You just kind of know, just gotta know when what needs it and what doesn't.
And Joe, the reason you originally wanted to bring up anime was actually a very specific example of a franchise we just talked about. But before we get there, talking about changing things because of the ending being different made me think that it's going to be weird in like 20 years when we get announced a Game of Thrones remake. We're like, all right, let's do this again. We're going to remake Game of Thrones, but this time the authentic version.
Man, will I live
That's
to see that day?
it's gonna happen.
Oh,
George R. Martin might not live to see that day. No offense to him. I don't think he's gonna live to see that day. I think once he's gone for a couple years and the nostalgia wave has hit, people are like, man, I remember Game of Thrones. And you're like, we're gonna do a Game of Thrones remake exclusively on streaming platforms. You know, whatever the new format will be in 20 years. Uh,
yeah.
they're gonna do it like that. But yeah, that'll be one. I don't even care about that franchise to say I don't want to see it, but probably don't need it. Um, but for a show that most definitely didn't need to remake material, uh, going back to anime, Joe,
All right.
you want
So
to take this one?
remember when they hyped up a return to Dragon Ball anime back in 2015? Remember when Dragon Ball Super shittily remade the like Battle of Gods Resurrection F into a 26 episode ordeal?
Yeah, they just made it worse. So at
Yeah,
that point,
like
wouldn't it have been cheaper to just pay Toei to be like, yo, can we use some of the movie footage?
like god damn, like that Resurrection F arc is like borderline unwatchable. And like, all right, like I think most of Dragon Ball Super sucks ass, but man, even then, like those two first arcs in particular, why?
It's like in this case, like Dragon Ball Super was only a couple years after those movies came out, so it's not even like people didn't have time to compare the two material. Like Dragon Ball Super only exists because of Dragon Ball, Battle of Gods and all that stuff coming out. So people were who were watching Dragon Ball Super most likely saw those movies just to see them made worse.
Yeah, like and like it looks bad now, but imagine being around back in the day. Like fuck, that was like half a year where this show was poorly adapting two movies, one of which wasn't even considered that good.
So just never do that again for any show. Just don't do that
Yeah,
again.
just don't do that again.
To vaguely bring this back to our topic, because now this just became a remakes we hate conversation. Don't ever do that again. Don't take a movie that already exists. Try to cram it into canon, but also force it to be a mere, was it half a year
Yeah.
of television? And then they did it again with the Frieza movie. They wasted over a year's worth of material
No, no,
on remaking things that already existed.
it's 26 episodes total. It's not that
Uh,
bad.
26 episodes for both Frieza and Battle of Gods.
Yeah, there were like 12 episode seasons each.
Alright, fine, half a year, whatever.
You know,
Felt like
yeah, like still, that's still bad. But
yeah.
all right, getting to yeah, so pretty much don't remake any film like that.
Yeah,
Christ.
don't do something that's stupid. No one's happy about it. They'd rather you do like filler garbage than
yeah,
waste your time remaking things people have already seen. Like Netflix was around by then. People could just go watch that movie on Netflix. They don't have to wait. 26 weeks just to watch the movie play out.
Yeah. So yeah. Um.
Oh, speaking of things that are a complete waste of time, that see no value to the consumer, I did think of one. Never do this again. Never, never Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey ever again.
I mean, they can't do that ever again. I'm pretty sure that sank the company.
That game killed the company. Um, so that is, I believe it is tied with Mario Clash on the Virtual Boy for the lowest selling outside of like maybe some weird educational titles, like really obscure. We're getting real low here. I think that game sold maybe about 100,000 or so, give or take. Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story.
Yeah.
A Mario game.
A Mario game is selling Klonoa numbers.
Mario and Luigi. A game on the 3DS. A remake of a popular game. Killed the company. No, I mean, we can get into the corporate politics of why Nintendo did that and how terrible of a move it was, but that's not important. The thing is that that game truly had no reason, not a singular reason to exist. You could play the game, the original, on your Nintendo 3DS already. It wasn't even 10 years old by the time the remake came out. You could probably still go to your local game store and find a copy for like $20. I was working at GameStop when that game came out, and we were selling Mario Bowser's Inside Story, the original, for less than the cost of the 3DS game, which you'd assume, but still, like, for less than the price, you could just go to the store and just buy the original. There's, it's an argument to be made which game looks better. The original still looks good. It has a different art style, but it still looks good.
Yeah, if people are debating whether or not your remake even looks better than the original, that should kind of tell you everything.
There was literally no reason. And, the Bowser Jr.'s journey is like a complete throwaway filler mode. Sure, maybe it's cute for like an hour or two, but you could have thrown that into literally any other Mario game. You could have put that in Paper Mario or Origami King or some crap. Just put a side mode on the main menu and be like, oh, you now play Bowser Jr.'s Journey.
Yeah.
So, there was just no point. I mean, you could argue the first Mario and Luigi remake was a little pointless, although it had been about 15 years or so. The 3DS was still kind of popular. I played it once, sold it, never gonna play that version again. I have the original Game Boy Advance version, but the 3DS version is not bad. Very pointless though, but it was fine. But no, Bowser Jr.'s journey was just a complete waste. It was such a waste. It killed the company.
Yeah. Or at least contributed to it.
I think it killed the company. I think Alpha Dream was in the red before with Mario and Luigi 1
Yeah.
not selling particularly hot
I guess
after
that's
a
also
steady
why they
decline.
skipped over the second one.
I mean, the second one actually needed some improvements and fixes, which a remake would have helped. Sure, it wouldn't have sold great, but honestly, I think it would have sold better than Bowser Jr.'s Journey because you don't remake a game that's so good that you can already play on your console. I mean, I guess unless you're The Last of Us, in which case you get away with it, but
Yeah.
the difference between PS5, which has no games, and the DS, the 3DS, which has millions of games, is quite different. You could play games on your 3DS. In the year 2022, there ain't shit to play on your PS5, despite having like over 1,000 games. So, I can understand the hunger to play something that already exists. But no, no one was playing games on the 3DS in 2019.
Yeah.
They sent that out to die.
You remade a game on a console that was already dead.
This this was like the third Nintendo remake on the 3DS to come out after the Switch already came out. Because if you remember, Luigi's Mansion and Metroid Samus Returns came out before Mario and Luigi. No, this is the fourth because Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga came out in 2017.
Oh yeah, and Fire Emblem Echoes came out in 2017 as
So this
well.
is like the fifth remake on the 3DS that came out after the Switch already released.
And I
There
think
was
like
no place. There was no place. People already spent the remake money.
yeah,
And like if that wasn't enough, the Switch was getting remakes of games like Link's Awakening and Pokemon Let's Go. People already spent their remake money.
oh my god, now that you mention it, what was
Oh wait,
that period of time?
that was a weird. It was when they weren't confident if the Switch was going to be a hit success. So I get releasing games in 2017. That wasn't an issue. Even 2018, they were probably in the pipeline. But by 2019, there was no reason to be doing.
Yeah,
You that would have had to have gone into production after Superstar Saga released, which already was after the Switch was already proving itself. There is no There
reason.
was no reason they should have greenlit that project. They could have. They should have canceled it and not even touched it.
Yeah.
They should have just canceled it as soon as they realized the Switch was selling like gangbusters. Because by the end of the first fiscal year for the Switch, they probably would have. Because I can't imagine it took them more than like a year to make Bowser's Inside
Nah,
Story.
the engine was already there.
Yeah, the engine was already. The game was already there. The engine was already there. So at every, there was no the dumbest. That was. It's quite possibly the one of the dumbest. I can't say the dumbest because there's been plenty of actually dumb Nintendos. But in terms of actual amount of dumb, that might be one of the dumbest decisions Nintendo's ever done. Not one of the worst, but one of the fundamentally stupidest decisions they've ever made.
Yeah.
Bro, it's like having like a level 100 character going up against a super boss in your back pocket, but then you send out your level 5 dude just because you felt like it.
Yeah.
You put the little league kid up against Jeter
Yeah.
when you got an actual MLB team, but you put the Make a Wish kid on the freaking team. I'm sorry, no offense to people who are Make a Wish. I'm just trying to draw a comparison for how substantially weak of an idea it would be, of how terrible an idea it would be to put a game like that out. So just never do that again.
All right. So yeah, talk about a game I kind of don't want to see remade. Um. Okay, like I do think that this would turn out well, but I just don't think the company involved should be wasting any more time dwelling on past games. Don't remake like any of the earlier Elder Scrolls games.
I don't think they have an interest in it.
I don't know. They might remake Skyrim.
Just remake it or remaster, put it on another machine.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I've seen the question of like Morrowind or Oblivion, and like I do think those would be good ideas. But Bethesda takes so long to make a game.
I can't imagine them doing it half-assed. It'd either be a remaster or nothing, or be a full-on game. I can't see them doing a half-assed one.
Remember last year when Rockstar like redid like three of the PS2 games and did it so
Yeah,
terribly?
yeah.
How did that happen?
That's more of a remake than well, it's more of a remaster than a remake, but that was just a matter of just not having enough time for your studio to produce this product. They knew it was coming, they knew what they had to do, and they just did not give them the resources or the time to make this product good, and they just kind of shat it out.
Yeah, I guess it shut up anyone who was asking for them.
Finally got Grand Theft Auto on a Nintendo console, but at what cost? You know,
Yeah,
which is crazy because they put LA Noire on the Switch, and that was actually pretty good. It was actually a pretty good port of the game, honestly. They took their time. They put in the effort. And you get this. I mean, obviously the GTA wasn't just on the Switch, but they did Point is that they put more care and love into LA Noire, a franchise that you only think about when you think about the meme of what's his name, Lamar or Lamal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like inverted cover art.
I mean, the only thing I think of when I hear LA Noir is press X to doubt.
Yeah, yeah, all the memes. Like they put more care into that than into their flagship franchise.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know what? Damn, I had it.
All
I
right.
had it and I
All
lost
right.
it.
Well,
I was just thinking about. Oh
I'll,
yeah, I was gonna. Or no, you can go. You can
I
go.
was gonna say one more Nintendo remake I don't want to see because we've already had it several times. But I see the question show up in this community. I don't want another remake of the Arcanea Fire Emblem games, which are the Marth games. Like they've been remade twice at this point, and yeah, like Shadow Dragon and FE12 are very ugly games. But man, this franchise does not need to dwell in the past any more than it has and is doing, even with their brand new game.
You say that, Joe, and yet we're dwelling on the past this entire episode.
Yeah, fair.
Speaking of franchise, I can't stop dwelling on the past. If we get one more goddamn remake of the original Star Fox, I'm gonna fucking lose it. Every Star Fox game that's not made by a third party is a goddamn remake of the original one, including 64. And then we get remakes of 64, which is effectively just a remake of the original. The only Star Fox games that are not remakes of the first game are ironically Star Fox 2, which is just a game on the same engine as the original Star Fox.
It didn't even
Uh,
officially come out until 2018.
Star Fox Adventures, which is a Zelda-like, Star Fox Assault, which is the best one, don't at me, and Star Fox Command, which is a remake of Star Fox 2, basically. Every other one, 64. Oh wait,
Zero.
we only have 64 and 64, 64, 3D, and zero.
There's not.
But like,
This franchise is sad.
there's not a lot. Everything that comes out is either we haven't had an original Star Fox game in over a decade because Zero is effectively a reboot. I think yeah, the Zero is meant in Japanese, like the use of that character is meant to sort of be like a rebirth, something to that effect, some mythology with the fox. I remember there was like a Nintendo video where Miyamoto was talking about that. So it's meant to literally be a rebirth of the franchise. Um,
Star Fox Zero is bad.
it is.
Like, man, that game is not good. Oh God, like, fuck. It, a franchise that had such promise, I don't think was ever handled well.
That's a whole discussion for another time. I most certainly agree. Um,
Like, we've mentioned how we like Star Fox certain games. Like, you like Assault, I like 64. But I don't think it can be argued that this franchise has ever handled that spectacularly.
it's always been sort of a weird. Star Fox had a very weird relationship with Nintendo. And not to get too far out of the realm of topic for it, Star Fox has had an issue much akin to other franchises where they lose focus on what to do with the IP because of hands changing and it being handled out by other. Star Fox has mostly been a third party produced franchise
Yeah.
where other companies handle the reins. So there's no clear focus, there's no clear direction because it's usually being handled by somebody else. It's like
Yeah.
Rare was the Namco, so it's like they're not gonna share notes or anything. And then the rare times that Nintendo handles it, it's like I don't know, dude. Yeah, we got Star Fox 64 again. Let's warm that up. Let's put that in the microwave.
Yeah.
Now, a franchise that did successfully rebirth itself with a number zero that came out in the mid to late 2010s, Yakuza, uh,
Yeah.
which is technically now the Like a Dragon franchise, as of the most recent one, ironically, with a remake of one of the samurai games that we never got in America. With Yakuza, it was Ishin, which is getting remade, which
Yeah.
is dope. Um, a game that you'd think I'd want to see remade, but I actually don't. Is not that, but it's Yakuza 3 and 4, 5. Please do not remake those games. Leave them alone. Yakuza 3 kind of sucks, but I'd rather than just leave them alone. There's a part of me that worries that we're going to get more Kiwami games. And the Kiwami games, um, I haven't played them myself. I've seen enough of the cutscenes, and I've played games. I've played most of the Yakuza games, so I'm aware of how the mechanics and the physics go. And I've seen a lot of the gameplay of it. But from everything that I've seen, it seems like the Kiwami games are generally inferior experiences to the original because they take too many things from the newer games, and tonally, mechanically, and it never kind of turns out well. They're fine
Yeah.
games if you've never played the originals, but if you have, they kind of feel like downgrades. And I'm not here to get into all the various differences and technical issues, Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2. But basically, just don't. I was worried for a while they were going to do Kiwami 3 or 4 or 5 or something like that. Hopefully, it seems like we're away from those. But those are just a quick example of, if you could remake it good and not completely screw up the tone and change the original intent of the games. Again, even though I think Yakuza 3 kind of actually sucks, I think it's kind of not that good of a game, whereas most of the other ones I like. So you think I'd be saying Yakuza 3? I should get a remake, but honestly, I would rather they just leave it be, just let it linger in the past and not bother remaking it, because the minute it took, I don't know, in my book, really divisively uh, mess up a lot of the core fundamentals of the first two Yakuza games in those remakes. And even if you do like Kiwami 1 and
Yeah.
2, I think it just doesn't make sense for them to go back and waste more time on those. I'd rather than do what they're doing now with Ishin, and hopefully they'll remake Kenzen, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get those damn PSP games remade. But just leave the mainline games alone. Especially because I don't want to have to deal with what the hell am I going to call this? Is it Like a Dragon Kiwami 3? Like, that's just going to mess with my head if we
Yeah.
stop using Yakuza on if they start remaking games and not calling them Yakuza, that's just going to fuck with me.
Oh yeah. This is not a specific game, but I'm just going to generally say a style of remake I don't want. I don't think anyone wants. Um, remember the Ratchet and Clank remake?
Oh yeah, yo, when's our Detective Pikachu read coming out?
Yeah. Like, don't do that again.
What, you don't want Street Fighter the movie, the game?
No.
That was such a sad no.
We
That's
have
such a
moved.
dejected
We should
no.
have moved on from that kind of crap.
That's such a weird. They made a licensed game, but it was made in house by a first party studio. Oh man, Ratchet and Clank 2018. That's a whole
2016.
conversation.
But yeah.
Wasted so much of my time. It didn't get to it till 2 years after 2018.
Yeah, it's just like, oh hey, it's Ratchet and Clank 1, but less.
And with awkward movie stuff crammed in that doesn't even fit the flow of the game. Not even like fit the flow of the original game. It doesn't fit the flow
Of this
of the
game.
game you're playing because you have to watch a movie to get some of the supplemental content. But then even watching the movie doesn't fully fill you in, and that movie sucks. Or it's at least very mediocre.
Yeah. Like, point being, don't.
Bro, you gotta do your homework to play a Ratchet and Clank game. You didn't watch the movie. How you gonna play the game? Is this gonna be on the test?
Yeah.
God, imagine if they. Maybe it's a good thing the Sly Cooper movie didn't happen, because who knows if they would have remade Sly 1 the exact same way? Who knows if that was their plan? Take their games, remake them into movies, and then remake the games and integrate. That would have been awful if they did the same thing they did with Ratchet as they did with Sly.
Man, I yeah. I just imagine what if that happened.
I'm imagining it, and instead of thinking how it works on the PS4, I'm just thinking of like old PS1 games based on movies where you play the game, beat a
Yeah.
level, and then you get a crusty FMV of the movie. And I know a PS4 game wouldn't be like that, but for some reason, that's how my brain is like processing it, trying to imagine this.
Okay. In this age where platformers have been successfully remade in a very high standard of quality, um, I think for the good of whatever company tries to do it, don't remake Gex. Make a new one.
You're, I mean, you could do a insane trilogy, I think maybe.
Yeah, but like the whole thing about Gex is like the pop cultural references.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like I don't
I
think
mean,
you could like
I don't think you should have the samurai level and all those other things that have not aged well.
yeah, like
Gex
yeah,
says things that you can't say anymore.
yeah. Port those over for historical sake, but don't remake those games. Just if you're gonna revitalize Gex, just make a new one with modern tropes.
Yeah.
Like I don't think
Oh, Gex is just like Deadpool now.
he basically like
Well, no, that's what people will say. Oh, dude,
yeah.
this guy's just ripping off Deadpool.
Uh,
I said that about the other fourth wall breaking green person.
yeah, the She-Hulk Gex connection.
Oh man, it goes deep. Oh man, if they had She-Hulk into Marvel's Avengers, who knows? Give her a Gex tuxedo just to complete the.
Yeah, like I do think you could do a lot of interesting things with Gex as an IP now, but don't remake it. You know, it's a game I think could totally be saved by a remake, but I'm very afraid we'll lose basically all of its charm if you did it.
Beautiful Joe.
I was gonna say the bouncer, but that too.
You talk about the bouncer first.
Like,
Talk about whatever charm the bouncer has. I'm not disparaging. Just I've seen that box art, and it looks like the box art you get at a game at GameStop in the mid 2000s.
the bouncer is a game that, yeah, gameplay wise, like I love its art direction, but gameplay wise, like sucks ass. But that game does not belong in any time period other than 2000.
That game looks like a fake game you'd see in the background shot in Jesse Pinkman's house in Breaking Bad.
Yeah, like you bring
He
this
would wear a shirt with that cover art.
you bring this Matrix Final Fantasy VIII ass brawler game into the modern era. I don't think a single thing about that game will land with a modern audience.
Oh. Speaking of the Matrix, did remind me of something, but before I get there, although I guess it does also have some Matrixy stuff. Beautiful Joe, don't do it. Cell shaded was such a specific thing for that era. Henshin heroes have a totally different perception, either better or worse, 20 years now from then. I think it'd be too, they'd make it too anime in like, I don't know, a very specific sense I can't really describe. It would feel more like No More Heroes does, which isn't inherently a bad thing,
It's
but it
just
would
that
be different. Like
that
how No
game
More Heroes
already
3 from
exists.
No More Heroes 1. Yeah, No More Heroes 1 to 3 visually look different and have a little bit different humor. I think Beautiful Joe, I think maybe a sequel, but I don't think. I mean, we don't have to worry. Capcom, well, actually, Capcom's been remaking everything lately, so who knows? Maybe we'll get a remaster collection of Beautiful Joe in a couple years. But I don't think they should get
Yeah.
a nice remaster. That'd be excellent. I would be down for it. I would buy that immediately.
Yeah.
But not a remake. But speaking of outdated The Matrix parodies, um, they already remade this game once. Please don't. Do you think there is any possibility that Conquer could get a remake? Conquer's Bad Fur Day.
Dude, They haven't remade Banjo yet, let alone Conquer.
True. I'm not worried it's gonna happen. It's just more so.
Like,
It,
if it were possible, would I want it?
I mean, they could improve the gameplay, but I think it's one of the. It's another one of those. The writing is so specific for its era.
Yeah. And like, I think it's not as bad if an idea is, say, like Gex, but I feel like at that point, just make a new game because you'd probably be writing it with the intent that people are already tired of remakes.
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
Conquer itself was kind of a corruption of the collectathon game that was pretty big up until that point.
yeah, you'd have to basically make fun of a new genre now, which at this point would be a whole new game.
Yeah, you're
And
just
like you
making a
can't,
different game.
yeah, and you can't lean on the meta jokes because you even did that in your first remake where you made a joke about how I thought this is just a simple port when they changed the combat to like a third person
Yeah.
like beat 'em up style. Um, I wish I had started this topic about Conquer 10 minutes later because then it would have been the morning of the next day, and then I could have said, "Is it a little early in the morning to be talking about Goth architecture?" Which is just, I don't know why that's one of my favorite lines from that franchise. Every now and then I just feel like, "Is it a little early in the morning to be talking about Goth architecture?"
Yeah. Point being, yeah, that game's appeal is really specific to a particular time and cultural landscape that, yeah, just kind of doesn't work like that.
Just like another rare property that hopefully they never actually do a full on remake. Well, they did a remake of, but there's always the topic of remaking it again. Just let GoldenEye be. Don't, they're working on Perfect Dark right now. Don't remake GoldenEye. You did the remaster. You did the Wii remake with Daniel Craig. Just don't. I feel like there's got to be someone who wants GoldenEye to get remade, and it's like just leave it. It doesn't make sense. You got the Wii version. Just leave. And that's like a Call of Duty clone that just works in the GoldenEye engine or in the GoldenEye stages, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe that's a little disingenuous, but I know that Call of Duty's code has something to do with that GoldenEye remake.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm thinking of the other GoldenEye. Point is that uh, don't don't remake GoldenEye. That's another one of those legacy games that like it has its place in history already. Don't do it.
Yeah. All right. Hmm. Is that it?
Hmm. I think there's more we could talk about. Although now I feel like I'm running out of games that I don't want to get remade, and I've been thinking more about games that I might want to get remade.
And
But
that
maybe
sounds like
we
a
should
different
save that.
episode.
Yeah, maybe we should save that for next time. Because now that we've cleared out the stuff I don't want, uh, we can talk about next time the games that I would. Oh, you know what? Do not, do not ever remake Scrabble First Edition PS1. That game is a 11 out of 10. Don't remake it. Anytime I see Scrabble for a PS1 remade, I'm pissed off. You make a different Scrabble, but don't remake Scrabble for PS1.
All right, so all those developers out there think, man, I should remake the Scrabble PS1 game. Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do it. That game is perfect. Do not do it.
Ah. All right.
But yeah, I think next time we will talk about games that we think should get a remake.
All right. Yeah.
And you'll just have to stay tuned because we're going to have one hell of a time talking about it.
Yeah. Hope to see you again back at the table. I'm stopping the stream now.
Cool.